Yes, Intergalactic High Priestess Lioness. And I have with me.
Pamazo Sunwobble here
Yes.
at your service.
Yes, and we're here to talk about some what I find exciting because we're on our fourth show now and we're getting to the root of some things, and when you can get to the root of something and see it, and you can better find a solution around it. But first, I want to talk about last week's show. I got some feedback from someone who was watching and loved the show, but they wanted to give me feedback. I made a comment about an East Indian woman, and I let the caller know it is not my intention to spew hatred or to stereotype a group of people. That this was something that I had encountered, and it was truth. This was her background or heritage. So I just want to say, I hope all our listeners are putting their thinking cap on and not seeing that this show is about psychological warfare, or that I said an East Indian woman, not all East Indian women.
You weren't
So,
generalizing.
I wasn't generalizing.
You were talking about your own particular experience.
My own particular experience. Okay. Similar to the news, which I find because they may say when they talk about our community, a black male or a black female, but if it's anybody else's community or geographical area, it's a man, a woman. So that's something I think we could have a show on and talk about. Why, as a community, are others allowed to classify us? But if we classify them, the brakes are supposed to be put on. I that is something I don't understand. I'm not trying to cause problems. It was just something that I encountered and shared because I want my viewers to know I'm a tolerable person, and I often walk past these psychological warfare tactics that are being used on our community. I just wanted to connect with our viewers and share with them, yes, I have experienced these things, that they are real. This is not something that's just made up in our mind.
And a lot of times when you experience something, it creates a metaphor that can apply, to a lot of different situations. Like look at Detroit. There's always a saying that the things that happen to black people in Detroit, they seem to be contrived, they seem to be planned, they seem to be premeditated, with the feeling that if you can get away with it in Detroit where they're 80% black, heck, you can get away with it anywhere black people are. And so when they built highways, through the black business districts in Detroit, they did it all over the place. Yeah. They didn't stop with Detroit. They said it worked in Detroit. We destroyed their economic base, and we got federal monies. We built a highway that allowed the people that were wanting to get out of Detroit a quicker way to get to the suburbs, and they said, hey, look what happened in Detroit. So that went from a notion to a metaphor. You can apply that in many instances. So.
Oh yeah, the warfare is real. When we look at the evidence, we see Detroit was called the Paris of the Midwest, and here, it's just, we have some areas that did survive, but overall, the politicians, they're our leaders in this government, this constitution, what it's supposed to stand for, what was allowed to happen to Detroit and its inhabitants people should be. We should go to the Hague, and we should have people put in jail.
Right.
Because we are men. I am not from the standpoint that I need my oppressor of our community to tell me now I'm a human. That I once was 3/5 or considered non-human for the 13th Amendment to tell me. Because when the Constitution says man, that my logic said that includes my community.
Right.
So I'm going to take that argument and we're human. So, but I really want to get into this psychological warfare because is it real, Sam Wabo? Is it real? Is it a myth? Did this happen?
The psychological warfare. Well, I'll give you an example. I got into an interesting discussion with some people on the Zoom call, and we were talking about mental health. I mentioned to you earlier, and so I asked the question. And these are all black people online, right? And I asked the question: define retardation. And a lot of people online were offended by the fact that I would say the word retardation amidst a group of black people. And I said, no, we need to, the lady was talking about mental health and the situations that we found ourselves in. You know, the symptoms, depression and anxiety. You know, are we surprised or something that black folks are inundated with depression and anxiety after 250 years of oppression and destruction, you know, to their psychic? And you talk about the thing about psychological warfare, you know, and the psychological warfare goes way back, you know. But I raised the question of retardation, and I was saying, well, the dictionary just briefly defines it as a delay, whether it's in development or whether it's in the process of something. It's a pause. It's a holding back of a process, you know. And so then we look at ourselves. Are we suffering any retardation in the area of economics? Have we been delayed, held up, or held down? Or let's look in education. I think Carter G. Woodson was saying, you know, that there's obviously, you know, some type of scheme going on where instead of black children being educated, they're being indoctrinated.
Yeah.
You know.
Into what? Because it looks like we're being... homosexuality was not prevalent in our communities. But it appears that we've been indoctrinated into that.
Well, even that, is this a form of retardation when teenagers go through a phase for a period of years of confusion, and then they look for solutions on TV, and they're bombarded with lesbianism and homosexualism, and they're just bombarded with it, and they're saying that we're normalizing this. We're creating funds. Hollywood is doing pictures. You know, everybody's going to normalize this process. You know, but you saying, is this going to sustain society?
Yes, but what happened to the stance that you were born homosexuality? Why do you need this bombardment?
Yeah, I mean,
why do you need this indoctrination?
They want to normalize it. Say, well, this is normal.
You know, since civil rights came in, when our community went into agreement with the Khazars, they what do you call it? They are not Hebrew by lineage, but they converted to the religion of Moses, who they're known to be the biggest homosexuals. Ever since this civil rights connection, our community has been leaning more towards their culture than ours. I find people who don't recall our culture. Our culture of now it's I got mine, you get yours. Whatever happened to the culture that I was going to reach back and pull
you
somebody up?
Our ancient African culture did not include homosexuality.
It did not.
Okay. The what do you call it? The Christian Catholic Church had some issues with homosexuality. That's coming back on them now. They got these predatory issues. What do they call it?
Oh, the pedophile in the pulpit.
Right. Okay. And then that's spilled over into the other Christian churches in which
the black church, the pimp in the pulpit.
The pimp and then it started hitting the choirs and stuff, and all this was reinforced and normalized, and now you got movies in which the main characters, have these values that where they can't control their tendencies, and so. But the question is, where is this all leading from? When you had strong African culture and societies, these societies multiplied.
Were these from tactics of slavery? Because I have had the pleasure of meeting a lady whose shoulders I feel we're standing on. Her name is Loretta Yancey.
Mm-hmm.
And her parents, I believe, she's old enough that either her parents or her grandparents were slaves.
Okay.
And I have been in the room with other people of a certain civic, ethnic background who are melanated. They wanted to tell her that slavery didn't exist. And I said, don't do that. Please don't. Okay. Maybe it didn't exist for your people. But don't tell someone what did or did not happen.
Are we erasing history or something to make somebody feel comfortable?
Well, I see. This is we wanna when it comes to us, because we come from an indigenous background. And I tell people, I come from an indigenous. I sit at a round table, and so I grew up. We always discussed. We worked through our issues. But one of the things about my indigenous background, we were about peace. And so our thing was, if we came to a point, we said, well, can we do this? Can we agree to disagree?
All right. That will
okay?
Work. Okay.
Can we leave it there?
See? Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a sign of maturity, when you can entertain another person's perspective and point of view, even if you don't agree with it. And a lot of times, if you want to bolster your argument to make it more persuasive, you consider the other person's argument, first. And say, considering this argument, now here's my argument. So if you can address their argument, your argument becomes more valid.
And see, that's where there needs, in my opinion, to be dialogue. Because are we going to get to the point where we just say, okay, peace, we're going to agree to disagree. You're saying it happened this way. I know it happened this way. That's kind of where I am. I respect Dr. Claude Anderson, but when he talks about the 5 civilized tribes, I'm going to have to tell Dr. Claude Anderson, in reference to my ancestors, I'm going to agree to disagree with you.
Okay, yeah.
And leave it at that.
That's the beautiful part about it,
yeah. So, because I just feel, and Medgar Evans, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X, 3 prominent civil rights leaders, even Stokely Carmichael. So I'm going to say 4.
Okay.
They all had different vantage points.
All right.
So that shows us that as a community, we have distinctions.
See? Well, yeah, I guess Stokely, of course, had the young person's point of view during that time. I think it being a part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that was their focus, which was a little more energetic, a little more radical. Wasn't as radical as the Panthers. They weren't a part of the civil rights movement anyway. But they were certainly about manhood and and civic rights. You know, yeah. You know, but what about what was your part? I didn't get all your point. You said
just about how at that time when we really were coming together to work on this issue of civil human rights, we have these 4 distinct leaders with varying pathways towards success in this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me, when I bring up that we have these distinctions, you know, people want to, they want to go, you know, they feel uncomfortable because they want to go back to that oneness. And that's why I called the show The Oneness of the Quilt. Because we're not a blanket.
See?
But this quilt is made up of several small squares.
Yeah.
Equal squares.
See?
And that's how I see our community. And that's why I use the term, for me, my community, rather than my people.
Oh, yeah.
Because there may be this meritus manumission, which you taught me, I call black cracker. But remember, Grandma just said a beer of crabs. They over here on this square.
See?
I'm trying to help my square.
Yeah. But when you say community, you know, you have to take a close look at what we have and what we don't have. You know, I was talking to Dr. Claude Anderson at a book signing at the Afro-American Museum, Charles H. Wright Museum, and I asked him about community. You know, he said, we don't have a community. He said, a community has borders. A community has values. A community has an economy. You know, and what happens with black people when they try to create the economy? How many times does their money bounce in the so-called community? One time and it's out. Don't even bounce one time. You spend it, it's gone. You take whether you're dealing with Chaldeans, Arabs,
Oh, yeah.
Jewish, you name it. Their money bounce. Even Latino and Mexican people, their money bounce 5 or 6, 7 or 8 times. Let's see. I know the Chinese and the Koreans, their money bounces among themselves, you know, 10, 12 times before it leaves their community. The Jewish community, almost 20 times before it leaves their community. You know,
I want to talk about these communities though, as it relates to our community or the hood. Our wonderful Mayor Coleman Young, which was the first minority mayor of this nation, brought the Chaldeans in. And where is the give back to our community?
Well, I mean, people they don't recognize a black community. You know, even in the media, you know, they don't recognize a black community. It has no borders. You know,
so see, that tells me that's a psychological issue not to recognize us as a community. So I want to get back to this Willie Lynch because I think we need to unravel that because that's psychological from their point that they're not going to recognize us.
Right.
As a community.
And we don't recognize
or having a culture, because that's one of the reasons why.
So you're saying, where did this come from? Where did this mentality come from? And we were examining Willie Lynch. Are you going to do the thing and then we'll look at Willie Lynch?
Yeah. You're watching The Oneness of the Quilt, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and the other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV station in the world.
Okay. All right. So we've been talking about the Willie Lynch issue. You know, be it myth, be it fact, be it metaphor, be it practice, be it principles that impact the lifestyle and the lives of black people over the last 300 years. There was a letter put out that summed it all up. Practices and concerns of the writers of the letter, whoever.
For me, it's a legacy.
Right. Okay. And so they say this speech was said to have been delivered by Willie Lynch on the banks of the James River in the colony of Virginia in 1712, over 300 years ago. Lynch was a British slave owner in the West Indies. He was invited to the colony of Virginia in 1712 to teach his methods to slave owners there. And so he came in and he said, "Greetings, my he didn't say fellow Americans, but my fellow oppressors or my fellow slave owners." He said, "Gentlemen."
My fellow psychologically out of my mind people.
Okay, but it was true that they were all slave owners. You might have saw Thomas Jefferson or George Washington there, because they were, the slave owners. Matter of fact, it says, "Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I'm here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. With the indigenous people that we brought from not only other countries, but the ones that were already lived there. And he says, your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies." Okay, so he had a nice plantation there. He said, "Where I have experimented." He experimented. Okay. Why? I mean, is this a tradition, a culture of experimenting on black people?
Maybe they experimented on themselves first.
I don't know.
How do you get to this level of atrocity?
He said, "I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods for control of slaves." Okay, why is that so important? Is what they were scratching their head for. And he says, "Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented." Oh, I'll try that again. "Ancient Rome would envy us, if my program was implemented. As our boat sailed south of the James River, named for our illustrious king, King James, who wrote the Bible, whose version of the Bible we cherish. I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique." They got problems with slaves.
So was he saying that the Bible condoned this?
Well, he said, "Hey,"
or is this the way they interpreted the Bible?
Well, he brought up the fact that this James River, and the King James, who wrote the Bible, he said, "I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique." He said, "While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along the highway in great numbers, you are using the tree and the rope on occasions." Right? I mean, so he's saying, y'all messing up. Rome, of course, the European Gentiles, as you call them, were not hanging, but boarding up, locking up on crosses, crucifying the black African Jews. Okay. Well, he said, y'all messing up like they did. And he says, "I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock. These are not people, This is stock. This is money, right? I mean, they did give out land grants and stuff to people. They came from Europe. Some of them right out of jails and stuff. But they did give them more money if they had some slaves.
Oh, that's a great point. The heinouses.
They gave them more land.
Most of the people from Europe that came here were criminals. So the heinousness, is this why we find, because we've had slavery all over the world, but the atrocity, I can't recall any atrocities like what happened in the Americas. So is this why we have this, because we're dealing with the criminal element of Europe?
Well, I mean, it was this construct of whiteness they created along with this process, okay? The white slave master, because the what was that little system they had before, where you would have you indentured slavery 5 years and then you work your way out of it and stuff. But they said no, we still got to go back and recruit more people. So if we can create a color conscious economy, we can perpetuate this thing.
Right.
Okay, and so they created the construct of whiteness. Okay, but nevertheless.
So, but what organ are we talking about? Because, as I understand, it's the color of another organ that is important.
Well, once they created the construct of whiteness, the construct of non-whiteness became, workable.
Yeah.
Anybody that wasn't white, of course, weren't entitled to the new policy, the new privileges.
Okay.
The new access to capital, the new access to land. And so I dubbed the night. Whatever.
Okay. So
they weren't doing it with black folks. Once they created this,
teach me. I want to understand. So this all came out of the church.
Yeah. Well, let's see what Lynn is trying to run down to the slave owners. Okay, he says, look, you're not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the field too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. Part of the problem was who wanted to be a slave.
Exactly.
Like these people were supposed to just lay down, for oppression.
I want to say this. Slave that I know of came from the word Slav, Eastern European, who used to they used to put themselves to work for other people. Especially, they were known to put themselves to work for an Arab. But that Slav or slave got paid.
See?
So I really want us to, as a community, to understand our word choice. Were we in slavery or were we in bondage?
We were enslaved to create an economy of free labor that to this day made this country very, very strong and prosperous, and they're reneging on not only the 40 acres, but they're saying we don't even want it. We're going like this when it comes to reparations. What are you talking about? Did you say, they come up with other words and they're trying to water it down. Oh, this city is going to give out reparations. They got 850 residents there, and they're going to give them $1,200 a piece in a vacant lot, And isn't that nice? And so, they're trying to water down the whole discussion of reparations. But nevertheless, it was free labor.
And I just want to make because I want to be fair. I try to be fair. The Delta of Africa knew about these types of things and yet still raped its own for this.
See?
So when we start talking about reparations, let's not forget these billionaires in the Delta of Africa and what they owe the Americas.
Well, I understand they do have some rituals there that acknowledge, and they have some very deep emotional rituals that go on there. I don't know whether they put any substance behind it for the ones that have the wealth that's able to do it, but a lot of them have rituals that acknowledge their misdeeds of selling out their own people.
Right. When I come from the background, you got to repent in a man. An amendment means more than just doing a ritual. Okay, you've got to correct the consequences of what your actions did. So, if they really want to do a ritual, dig into the ground if you got to get the wealth to help the urban areas here who are suffering from the effects of this psychological warfare. And not only that, people were taken from their parents and then taught this nonsense. So you didn't have a parent to help you. And when you talked about retarded today, why some of our children are perpetually into this. They never learn to read, and this is a tradition that has been handed down. You don't read because fear were put into people. These intimidation tactics and all these things, were done, and a lot of people are still suffering. Let's make the case for accountability, not only to the Delta of Africa, the British, the Persian, the Aryans, who were all backing this.
Right. But think about Africa for a minute. A lot of those countries were colonized, and right now, even China's getting in on messing with their economies. You remember what happened with Muammar Gaddafi? He provided free education, free land, grants to families that were raising children. He was building a society, based on the oil wealth of the country.
So,
and what happened?
Here we go with another psychological. He was denoted a terrorist because he was helping his people. He knew he was from black blood, and he helped Africa.
Well, he was like Coleman Young in a sense when the corporations came in Detroit, tried to raid Detroit, and he stood up and said, no. Who y'all think y'all dealing with? You sit around the table and you show me what it is you want, and you show me how it's going to benefit this city and the citizens in this city. And when the news come up there asking him dumb questions, his famous statement was, you get these reporters that coming in and sent in with, from surrogates with questions to try to undermine what's going on and change the image of what's happening. He would look at them and say, "Who in the hell are you?" And send them packing. And he, and so you don't have that today. You have mayors that come up with policies that say we're going to create a highway to Detroit from the suburbs. To come in and just develop, and you get rich and we get nothing.
Okay. Well, how do we keep the accountability? I think of the country Israel. We got to stop for a break and take care of some business. Okay. You're watching the Oneness of the Quilt live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.
All right, well, let me just show you how they did it. Okay, the question would be here. They had problems with people that did not want to be slaves. They did not want to be exploited. They did not want to be brutalized. They did things, to that would protest, the behavior against them. And he says, are you having all kinds of, are you having fires, your animals killed, they're tearing up stuff? He says, you know what the problem is. He said, I don't need to elaborate. I'm here to enumerate your problem. I'm not here to enumerate and tell you how many you got. I'm just here to introduce a method to solve them. And he says, right here in my bag, I have a foolproof method for controlling your slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. Okay, and so that control is making itself evident. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your whip crackers, or what do you call it, or your overseers can use it.
Any color cracker.
Yeah. He said, I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves. And people spend a lot of time researching black people. Trying to find what makes them tick, trying to find some difference. And he said,
identity theft.
He said, and I take these differences and I make them bigger. I make them bigger. And he ran it down like this here. He says, I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. So he's got 3 different principles and practices that they use on a consistent basis, to control. He's talking about, you said psychological warfare. Okay, it says these methods have worked on my modest plantations in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Okay, and even Hitler took cues from Jim Crow in the South and applied it on the indigenous people in his area, the Jews. He took the principles of Jim Crow, of segregation and the brutality of that, and applied it, in with the Germans. Okay, and so he's, so somebody's researching somebody constantly, right? And they're applying these things into the modern day. And so he says, take this little list of differences, and I think about them, and have you think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's only there because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. Then there's intelligence, there's size, there's sex, there's the size of the plantation or the corporation, the status on the plantation or the corporation.
It's happening in corporate America in Michigan. I'm a witness.
And then he says,
ask Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan.
He says the attitude of the owners or the corporate owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, the suburbs, on the hill, or in the east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, okay, and you examine the behavior patterns and you try to alter those. Now that you have a list of differences, I should give you an outline of action. What you're going to do with these differences. But before that, I will assure you, right, guaranteed, okay, that distrust is stronger than trust. Okay, so he's saying, now let's work with that, right? Distrust is stronger than trust. And envy, right? Materialism and all this other stuff, and covetousness, is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. Okay, and so, and he's holding on to these three principles. He said the black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, and then isn't that what Carter G. Woodson called it?
Yeah.
There wasn't no education.
Indoctrination.
It's an indoctrination. He said after they received, he said the black slaves, after receiving the indoctrination, shall carry on and will become, they called it back then, self-refueling and self-generating. I guess reinforced is probably a better word. What he said, it would be reinforced. They would be self-reinforcing.
Right.
Say,
Because you got to remember, people were taken away from their mothers.
Right. He said they'll do it themselves. Carter G. Wilson said the same thing. He said if there's no back door, you make them think they're inferior, and they believe it.
Yeah.
They call it the doctrine of black inferiority. And then they call it another one. It's called the acceptance of the doctrine of black inferiority. So one can hear the doctrine and know how it works, and another hears and accepts it.
Wow.
Okay. And he
This
says,
is deep. This is deep.
He said they will become self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And don't forget, and here goes the pitch. You ever heard of advertisers doing pitching?
Yeah.
People always got a pitch. Watch the Super Bowl and see what kind of pitch that they have. Okay.
Right.
They said, don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male. You ever seen that anywhere?
Oh, yeah.
You ever seen, instead of the elder presenting the source of wisdom and knowledge, where the young male sits at his feet in respect and adulation? He said, no, you got to pitch one against the other. Be creative. Find ways to pitch like an advertisement.
And this is away from our culture.
Right. I mean,
this psychological warfare that was done in our community is the total opposite of what our culture would educate our community about.
Well, they're talking about it for two reasons. The main obvious surface reason is profit, money. They're saying you're running a plantation that's losing money. you know. But they got a more devious plan down the line. We'll get in there. Ask Frances Cress Welsing what that devious plan is. And she'll run it down to you and show you in detail. We might touch on it. But
and again, we're not trying to stereotype. We're just laying out the facts. Devious is devious.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about this slave owner talking to other slave owners as to how to operate profitably at the expense of exploiting other people with free labor.
Right.
He says, ain't nothing free. It's gonna cost you. And the way y'all doing it right now is costing you too much. And he says, so you pitch, the young black male against the old black male. The old black male, if that don't work, switch it around. Pitch the old black male against the young black male. He said, you must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves. That don't work. Use the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. He says, you must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. He said, whatever works. Just pitch them against each other, creatively. He said, then you must also have your white servants and overseers who distrust all blacks. You create a policy.
Yeah.
You create a culture.
Yes.
You create a corporate culture.
Yes.
You create where you have no one who trusts the black person.
Oh, I lived it. I lived it in the 21st century.
Okay.
But I had some white, I want to say they were workers. They came to me and they said, I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. That
but they're not sorry
these
for the benefits that they're deriving for what's happening to you.
But the devious people, and I want to make sure, I want to say something good right here. Let us remember the Quakers, the Underground Railroad, that helped our community. So not all white people were in this, but we are talking about the devious white people, and they started this categorization that you have informed us through the church of this white-black stuff. So when I say white, I'm not trying to be prejudiced, but we're talking about the devious whites.
You're talking about the construct of whiteness, is what you're saying. Something that was created for the sake of oppressing other people.
By devious white people.
Just to make it easy.
Right.
And other people who benefit from them, of course, are silent. They're the silent majority who's benefiting from the oppression of other people who looking the other way, and they have nothing to say unless it challenges their benefits.
Okay. Well, I do want to make a note that the British, there were woke British who did understand their silence and acceptance of these things. Who's to say if we would have ever came out of this as a community if those British didn't start working to be abolitionists?
See?
So I want to bring that in and not keep people. I don't want to get it. I want us to be thinkers. And I want you not to look at color. I want you to see devious and non-devious.
Right.
That's what I want out of this. Don't look at color.
You say it has nothing to do with race, right?
That's what
Whoopi Goldberg said.
Evil or good. Evil or good.
That's what she was saying. That was her argument.
Yeah. Evil black, because I've called out the black cracker.
She said these folks were so evil that they oppressed other white people. And, and the argument was,
and you did mention that in the letter, your white servants.
They castigated her for saying that.
Yeah, so there were white servants. A redneck was a sure enough cotton picking slave because he got sunburned.
He could stop being a redneck anytime he wanted to.
But he got sunburned. Slave. So let's remember. Let's not fall into their trick. They were evil.
Right. Yeah, okay. Well, Martin Luther King said that. He said they were sick. But let me finish up the last part of it. He said, you must have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. You know, they're saying that they have to love, respect, and trust white folks. You know, you ever heard people say,
so they don't want us using our thinking capability.
Master love me. Remember in Django?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Master. You know, Master loved me. Master wouldn't do me that way. He would not do. I don't believe Master would do me that way. And that's where I think who was it talking about that? Claude Anderson was talking about even with black folks when they see that white Jesus on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Don't mess with the white Jesus. You're just creating problems for yourself with black folks because so many of them are so." It's so ingrained in their head that white folks love them.
But how do you read and look at the Bible? The Bible clearly tells you about Jesus' hair,
Right.
his skin tone, all of this.
The people and the times and the locations all indicated they are African
Exactly.
people.
So, again, that tells you that this for you to get this image that he was Snow White and silky hair, when the Bible clearly talks about his hair looking like wool, lamb's wool. So, again, that tells you right there, we know we're dealing with a person out of touch and in a delusion.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I want to close this out, and you got a commercial.
Okay, yeah.
And,
I got to stop and take care of some business. You're watching the Oneness of the Quilt. Live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And I want to give a shout out to Soma Bishada. That's my nonprofit. It's a literacy nonprofit. I'm working hard, y'all, to strive to reduce the illiteracy rate in our community and to take the shame out of learning. Because that's why I want to talk about Willie Lynch today, because shame has been put into a lot of our community that learning isn't for them. Learning is white. For them, they've been done so bad by white people. White is evil. They've been indoctrinated. And we've got to start there because we're in the 21st century. If we're really going to talk about equality and bringing up our community, you must read. This is not an agricultural system anymore.
All right. Well, in the last few minutes, Willie Lynch finished up the letter, and I have a response to the Willie Lynch letter. But anyway, he closed it out by saying that, you know, they have to trust only white folks. He said, "Gentlemen, these kids are your keys to control of the slaves. Use them. Have your wives and children use them on those slaves. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely from 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful." Thank you, gentlemen. And that's all they want to do. Don't trust each other. They'll never understand the concept of unity. They'll never understand the concept of creativity. They'll never understand the concept of community. You know, they'll always thrive to have disjointed neighborhoods. You know, okay. So I did put together a reply to the Willie Lynch letter.
Okay, and could you tell us your name again? I want everybody. That's I love it. A reply.
Lenezo Sunwabo reply.
Lenezo Sunwabo.
Okay. And it goes like I'm saying, I'm here to help solve some of your problems with individualism. Also with indivisibleism. You've heard the phrase one nation, indivisible, right? And so we haven't grasped individualism yet, other than to act it out, to know that it's something that destroys us within and without, destroys our community, trying to be individual in a society that's totally institutionalized. Institutional racism has full control of you at that point when you're trying to be an individual. Yeah. Okay, and so I'm saying we're moving to individualism. And so I started out with my announcement to the slaves.
Okay.
I said, you are not a slave. And you cannot allow allow enslavement for yourself. You cannot allow enslavement for your family or for your people. You are not to be employed, manipulated, put upon, sat upon, fixed up against one another, each other, or against your family or people in any way. You can't allow that if you're going to build some principles. You are not to be used, exploited, or taken advantage of as a people, because you are unbreakable, unified, and inseparable. You are indivisible. As a family, as a group, as a community, as a culture, and as a nation. A nation that was born in the tradition of love, respect, adoration, and all the God-given divine commonalities, not the differences. The God-given divine commonalities, the qualities, the characteristics, and the gifts of creative intelligence, and the mystical powers of the universe. I mean, you endowed with all these things. You don't let people enslave you, enslave your mind, enslave your community, enslave your family. It says, it is your innate belief that allows you to walk by faith and not by sight, knowing that there is a creator that has planted in you the seeds of life that connects us to an endless universe we are an integral part of. You know, we're all connected.
Yes.
I thought I heard you say connection.
Connections. Yes.
Well,
Ashe.
Everything. Okay. It says, you are inseparable as the elements of your DNA that reveals the origins and history, the migrations, the creations, and the accomplishments and spiritual connections to an ever-expanding cosmos. You are the substance and proof and verification that everything is everything. It is your unbreakable, prominent genes that provide permanence and perpetuity, displaying balance, truth, justice, harmony, and order to the work of the Creator. You are the bearers and the couriers of the divine laws that tethers mankind to nature and links us all to the heavens. Now, know that you have been exalted with the holy and angelic assignments of restoring the sacredness to our family, restoring the sacredness to our community, and restoring the sacredness to our culture and our people. For it will be by your creativity and determination to bring wisdom and understanding in such a way it creates a tsunami of peace, equilibrium, and symmetry throughout the world. And accordingly, you will rise, black people, and know that you are bestowed from the very beginning with the gifts, the attributes, the characteristics, the blessings, and the likeness of the Creator to fulfill the sacred trust with those that have gone before us and with those that come after us. That is exactly why nothing is more sacred than the liberation of black people. And that's what I told the slaves.
All right. Amen. Amen. Ashe. So let it be.
So I said, while Willie Lynch was busy talking to the slave owners, I was busy talking to the slaves.
Okay, well, we're going to need you to come and talk to some of these people that's telling me they are slave and recite that to them. Oh, wonderful stuff. Well, you've been watching the Oneness of the Quilt. We got to wrap this up. We'll see you next week at 5 p.m. Sorry we were a little late today, but we made it happen. So you've been watching the Oneness of the Quilt, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. I'm Madam A.S. Interclock, High Priestess Lioness.
And Pamazo Sun Wobble, and I know we got something great coming up for next week. What we got?
I think we're gonna have to collaborate to finish, because you just lifted us off on something very beautiful. Let's take something out of what you wrote to the slave.
All right.
Let's take something out of
connect ourselves with.
Let's start reaching for the high mark.
See?
Yeah, let's start reaching.
All right.
We've identified the issue. Now let's start talking about reaching for the solution.
There you go.
Yeah.
Peace and love.
Love and peace.